Settle in, get comfortable, let the world outside fade away. Pull the blanket up, find that soft spot on the pillow, and let your breath slow down. We're going to go back in time tonight to a place that no longer looks the way it did, to a night that changed everything, but we're going to get there gently. This is a story about water, about a town that was built in a valley, and about a wall of water that erased it. But not yet. First, we need to step into the quiet before the noise. It's a late spring evening in the year 1889 in western Pennsylvania. The town of Johnstown is nestled in a narrow valley where two rivers, the Little Kanemaw and the Stana Creek, join together to form the Kanemaw River. The air is warm and heavy, the kind of evening that feels like it's holding its breath. The hills rise up steep on either side, dark green with trees, and the houses and shops cling to the slopes and the flat bottom of the valley. It's an industrial town, a steel town, full of the low hum of mills and the clatter of trains. But at this hour, things are winding down. Families are sitting down to supper. Children are playing in the streets, and the last light of day is fading into a dusky twilight. There's a sense of ordinary life here, the kind of life that feels permanent, solid, like it's always been this way and always will be. People know their neighbors, the streets have names, the churches have steeples, and the river flows through town like a quiet companion. But high above the town, 14 miles away, there is something that no one is thinking about. A dam. The South Fork Dam. It holds back a lake, a man-made lake called Lake Kanemaw, a sprawling body of water built as a summer resort for the wealthy. The dam itself is an earthen structure, a long mound of clay and rock, about 72 feet high, 1,000 feet across, and it has sat up there for decades, holding back the water, growing old and neglected. The dam was originally part of the Pennsylvania Main Line Canal system, built to supply water for the canal locks. But by this time, the canal is long abandoned, and the dam has changed hands several times. In 1879, a group of wealthy industrialists from Pittsburgh, men like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick, formed the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. They bought the dam and the land around it, rebuilt the dam somewhat, and turned the lake into a private resort. They built cottages, a clubhouse, a marina, a place where they could escape the smoke of the city and enjoy fishing, boating, and elegant parties. The lake was a jewel, around 2 miles long and 1 mile wide, deep blue water tucked into the Allegheny Mountains. But the dam was never properly maintained. The club owners made some modifications, but they were not engineers. They lowered the dam's top to make a roadway wider. They put a fish screen across the spillway to prevent their prized trout from escaping, and they did nothing to reinforce the aging structure. Over the years, the dam had developed leaks, small seepages, and there were reports from local farmers and engineers that it was unsafe. But the wealthy club members didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to spend money on repairs, and they didn't want to drain their lovely lake. So the dam sat, year after year, holding back an immense weight of water, growing more fragile with each season. Now in the spring of 1889, a heavy rain began to fall. It started on the afternoon of May 30th. a steady drizzle that turned into a steady rain, then a heavy rain, and then an unrelenting downpour that lasted for days. The ground became saturated, streams swelled, rivers rose. In Johnstown, the streets grew muddy. The river crept up its banks, but people were used to spring floods. The town had flooded before, many times, gently, gradually. So they watched the water with a kind of weary familiarity, not alarm. They moved their goods a little higher. They prepared for some inconvenience, but no one imagined what was coming from above. Up at Lake Canema, the rain was worse. The mountains funneled the storm, and the lake began to rise quickly. The dam's spillway, partly blocked by the fish screen, was overwhelmed. The water started to top the dam, cascading over the edge, eroding the earthen face. The situation turned critical on the afternoon of May 31st. The rain was still falling, the sky a dark pewter color. Some men at the lake realized the dam was failing. They tried to warn the town, but their efforts were too little, too late. They sent a rider on horseback to Johnstown, but the rider never made it, or his message was dismissed. They tried to telegraph a warning, but the wires were down from the storm. So the dam, after years of neglect, after days of rain, began to give way. It didn't burst all at once, but it crumbled, slowly at first, then in a cascading failure. A section of the earthen wall softened, then broke, and water pushed through the gap. The gap widened, and suddenly the full force of the lake was unleashed. A wall of water, perhaps 40 feet high at the dam site, but growing as it funneled down the narrow valley, surged forward. It carried trees, boulders, parts of the dam itself. It was a dark, roiling mass, traveling at speeds up to 40 miles an hour, and it had a sound, a horrible low roar that grew louder as it descended. The people of Johnstown, 14 miles downstream, had no idea. It was around 4:10 p.m. on Friday, May 31st. Some people were indoors, some were on the streets, some were watching the river rise. A few looked up at the hills and saw a strange cloud, a mist, or they heard a sound like thunder that didn't stop. But by then it was too late. The wave hit the first small towns along the way, washed them away, and then it reached Johnstown. The water slammed into the town with a force that is hard to imagine. It didn't just flood the streets, it smashed buildings, ripped houses from their foundations, overturned trains, uprooted trees. It carried everything with it, a churning maelstrom of debris, wood, metal, human beings, animals. The water filled the valley from side to side, and it surged through the town in a matter of minutes. It was not a gentle rising. It was a violent explosion of water, and it erased the town. A few structures survived, stone bridges, stronger buildings, but the rest was turned into a tangled heap of wreckage that piled up against those bridges and burned in a fire that started from overturned stoves and gas lamps. The death toll was staggering. Over 2,200 people perished. Bodies were found for months afterward, some lodged in debris, some swept downriver, some never found. The town was gone, and the survivors were left in a landscape of mud and ruin. But we're not there yet. We're still in the quiet before, where the rain is falling and the dam is holding, where the town is alive with the sounds of an ordinary evening. So let's stay here for a moment in that innocent time and look around. Imagine Johnstown on that Thursday evening, May 30th, before the worst of the rain began. The streets are lit with gas lamps. The air smells of coal smoke and wet earth. A man is closing the door to his shop on Main Street. A woman is calling her children in for supper. There's a train station with the last passenger train of the day pulling in, passengers stepping off onto wooden platform. The Kanema River glides past, dark and slow. People are thinking about the long weekend ahead, about summer coming, about ordinary things. No one is looking up at the dam. Up there, on the water of Lake Kanema, the waves are lapping against the shore of the resort. A few club members are still at the cottages, enjoying the rain from their porches, watching the dark clouds roll over the mountains. They might think about the lake rising, but they trust the dam. After all, it has held for years. The servants at the club are going about their duties, carrying firewood, lighting lamps. The whole scene is peaceful, but the dam is groaning. The water is pressing, and it's only a matter of time before the first crack appears. We'll get to that crack soon, but for now, let's let our minds drift. Think about the weight of water, the pressure of gravity, the slow work of erosion. Think about how something so massive can be so quiet until it is. The rain falls on the lake, millions of drops, each one a tiny addition to the pressure. The ground beneath the dam absorbs the water, softening the clay. The fish screen holds back leaves and debris, but it also holds back the water's escape. The whole structure is a kind of clock ticking down. And in the town below, the clocks are ticking too, but they're not synchronized. People are going about their lives, their small routines, their conversations. A woman is knitting by the fire. A man is reading the evening paper. A child is trying to catch a raindrop on the window pane. They don't know that the dam is slowly failing. They don't know that the wall of water is already forming itself, gathering like a coiled spring. The story of the Johnstown Flood is a story about the gap between what we know and what we don't know, about the fragility of the things we build, and about how suddenly the world can change. But in this moment, it's still a story about a town on a rainy evening, about a dam that looks solid, about the illusion of safety. We're going to stay here in this drowsy state and let the rain fall. Let the river rise. Let the night deepen. And in the next segment, we'll follow the water as it begins its journey down the valley. For now, just breathe and listen to the quiet hum of the 19th century, the distant whistle of a train, the hush of the rain. Everything is still. Everything is waiting. Let us settle deeper into this rainy evening. Let the sound of the rain become a kind of white noise, a blanket over the valley. The gas lamps flicker, and the wet cobblestones gleam like dark mirrors. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool and coal smoke, and somewhere, a dog is barking lazily at the gathering clouds. In the houses along Main Street, families are gathering for supper. The clatter of plates, the murmur of voices, the creak of floorboards underfoot. A woman is stirring a pot of stew over a cast iron stove, the steam curling up toward the ceiling. Her husband is reading the Johnstown Tribune, his boots propped up on a footstool. The headlines are about local news, a new bridge being built, a church picnic planned for June, a note about the rising river, nothing alarming. He folds the paper and lays it aside. The rain taps at the window panes, a steady, patient rhythm. Outside, the streets are nearly empty. A few people hurry home, their collars turned up, their hats pulled low. A boy is splashing through puddles, his boots making satisfying sounds. His mother calls him from the doorway and he runs, his laughter trailing behind him. The Kanema River, visible from the end of the street, is dark and swollen, but not yet dangerous. It looks like it always does during a heavy rain, a little higher, a little faster, but contained. Up in the hills at the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, the scene is different. The rain is heavier there, driven by the mountain winds. The lake, usually a placid blue, is now a dark gray, churning with white caps. The trees along the shore bend in the gusts. The cottages, with their broad porches and tall windows, are lit from within, the gas lamps casting warm pools of light. Inside one of these cottages, two men are sitting by the fireplace. They are club members, wealthy industrialists from Pittsburgh who come here to escape the city. One of them, a man in a tweed jacket, is sipping brandy and watching the rain streak down the window. The other, a younger man, is poking at the fire with a brass poker. The conversation is light, about business, about the weather, about when the lake might be full enough for the summer boating season. The older man says, "It seems we may get a bit more water than we bargained for." The younger man shrugs. The dam can handle it. It has always handled it. They have no reason to doubt. The dam is a part of the landscape, as solid as the mountains themselves. They do not see the small cracks, the seepages, the slow erosion of the earthen wall. They do not hear the groaning of the old iron pipes beneath the surface. They are comfortable, warm, secure in their wealth and their distance from the town below. But the dam is not solid. It is an old dam, built decades ago for a canal system that no longer exists. The original builders knew it was a temporary structure, meant to hold a modest amount of water for a few years. But the club members, with their money and their desire for a private lake, had raised it, widened it, and ignored the advice of the engineers who warned them it was unsafe. They had placed a fish screen across the spillway, a grate meant to keep their prized trout from escaping, but it also trapped debris, leaves, branches, anything that floated down the streams feeding the lake. The spillway, already too small, became clogged, and the water had nowhere to go but over the top. And on this rainy evening, that is exactly what is happening. The water is rising inch by inch, foot by foot. It rises against the earthen dam, pushing, pressing, searching for weakness. The rain has been falling for hours now, and the ground is saturated. Every rivulet that runs down the mountainside is flowing into the lake, adding its weight to the growing pressure. Let us pause and consider the physics of it, but in a gentle way, like watching a kettle slowly come to a boil. A dam holds back an immense weight of water. For every foot of depth, the pressure increases. At the bottom of Lake Kanema, the pressure is enormous, like a giant hand pushing against the earthen wall. The dam is made of clay and stone, but clay can soften, stone can shift. The water finds the weak spots, the tiny leaks, and it begins to work them slowly, patiently, like a finger probing a hole in a cloth bag. The leaks grow larger. The dam begins to tremble. But on this Thursday night, no one feels that trembling. The rain continues and the town sleeps. The club members go to bed, their brandy glasses empty, their fire dying to embers. The servants clear the dishes and blow out the lamps. The lake rises. The dam groans. Let us move now gently to the morning of May 31st, a Friday. The rain has not stopped. It has been falling for over 15 hours and the ground is a sponge. The streets of Johnstown are rivers of mud. People wake to the sound of rain on the roof, a sound that has become monotonous, almost hypnotic. They go about their morning routines, but there is a certain heaviness in the air, a weariness. The flood of 1889 is not a sudden event, but a slow build, a gradual accumulation of water and worry. In the kitchens, women are lighting the stoves, boiling water for coffee, frying bacon. The smell of breakfast mixes with the smell of dampness. Men are preparing for work, but some are looking out the windows, measuring the height of the river with their eyes. The Kanema has risen overnight, and it is now creeping up the banks, lapping at the foundations of the buildings along the water. A few men walk down to the bridge to check the water level. They stand in the rain, hands in their pockets, shaking their heads. It is high, but not unprecedentedly high. They remember the flood of 1847 when the water reached the second floor of some buildings. This is not that bad. Not yet. The post office is open and letters are being sorted. The general store is open and people are buying extra candles and flour just in case. The train station is busy with passengers arriving and departing, the steam whistles cutting through the rain. Life continues, albeit with a soggy inconvenience. Up at the lake, the situation is more serious. The water has risen several feet over the spillway, and the whole dam is now under stress. The face of the dam, the side facing the valley, is beginning to bulge. A watchman, a local man hired by the club, is standing on the dam, looking at the water, looking at the cracks that are starting to form. He is worried. He has seen dams before, and he knows what a failing dam looks like. He sends word to the club members, but they are slow to respond. They are wealthy men accustomed to others solving their problems. They assume the watchman is exaggerating. By late morning, the watchman is desperate. He sends a rider on horseback down the valley to warn the towns. The rider, a young man named Elias, sets off at a gallop. The road is muddy, the rain is heavy, and the horse is nervous. Elias rides through the small communities along the way, shouting warnings. He stops at a telegraph office in a town called South Fork, and he sends a message to Johnstown. The message is brief. Dam is in danger. Leave at once. But the telegraph lines are down. The storm has knocked them over and the message never arrives. Elias continues his ride, but he has a long way to go and the water is already moving faster than his horse. It is now around 3 in the afternoon. The dam is on the verge of failure. The water is cascading over the top in a wide sheet, eroding the earthen face. The crest of the dam is crumbling piece by piece. A section of the upstream face, the side holding the water, is beginning to crack. The crack widens and water shoots through, a jet of white spray. The dam shudders. Let us imagine that moment. The sound is like the earth itself tearing, a deep, grinding rumble that grows into a roar. The dam's center collapses and the water, all of that pent-up water, is released. It does not flow, it explodes. A wall of dark water rising up to 40 feet surges forward, carrying with it the debris of the dam, trees, boulders, parts of the club's cottages, a boat, a picnic table. It roars down the valley at a speed that seems impossible, a destructive force that does not discriminate. And in Johnstown, 14 miles away, the people have no idea. It is a little after 4 in the afternoon. The rain is still falling, but it has slackened to a drizzle. The streets are muddy, the river is high, but life is normal. Children are playing in the shallow floodwaters, splashing in the gutters. A man is standing on the bridge, watching the water flow under him. He is thinking about the fishing, about how the trout will be abundant after the water clears. He is thinking about his wife's birthday next week. Then he hears a sound. It is a low rumble, like distant thunder, but it does not fade. It grows louder, and with it comes a vibration in the ground, a trembling in his feet. He looks up the valley and he sees something coming, a dark wall, a cloud of spray, a shape that his mind cannot process. He has lived his whole life in this valley and he has never seen anything like it. The wall of water is almost upon him. It is carrying trees like twigs, houses like toys. It is a swollen, churning mass of murky brown filled with debris. The roar becomes a scream, and then the water hits. The bridge he is standing on is swept away in a single instant. The houses along the riverbank are crushed, lifted, and carried. The water surges through the town, filling the streets, rising up over the first floors, then the second floors, then the rooftops. The noise is incredible. A cacophony of splintering wood, crashing brick, and human screams. But the screams are soon drowned out by the roar of the water. Let us not dwell on the violence. Let us instead think of the aftermath, the strange quiet that follows. The wall of water passes through the town in less than 10 minutes, but it leaves behind a world transformed. Where there had been streets and shops and homes, there is now a lake of mud and debris. The water begins to recede slowly, revealing the wreckage. The town is gone. The familiar landmarks are erased. The railroad bridge, a massive stone structure, still stands, but it is clogged with piles of wreckage, tangled heaps of lumber, furniture, and bodies. A fire breaks out in the debris and it burns for days, consuming what the water spared. In the days that follow, survivors emerge from the ruins. They are covered in mud, bruised in shock. They search for their loved ones, digging through piles of wreckage with their bare hands. The rain has finally stopped, but the sky is gray and the air smells of wet wood and death. But this is a sleepy story and we are far from the disaster. We are still in that rainy evening, sitting by the fire, listening to the wind. The dam is still holding. The town is still whole. The people are still going about their lives, unaware of what is to come. Let us stay here a little longer. Let us drift through the quiet moments of that Thursday night. Imagine the train station at Johnstown, the last train of the evening arriving from Pittsburgh. The platform is wet, and the passengers step carefully, gripping their hats. A young woman is waiting for her husband who has been away on business. She sees him step off the train and she smiles. They embrace, and he holds an umbrella over her as they walk home. They talk about the rain, about the garden, about the new wallpaper she has chosen for the parlor. They are happy, comfortable, secure. In a small house on a side street, a mother is putting her children to bed. She tucks them in, whispers a prayer, and kisses their foreheads. The rain drums on the roof, a soothing sound. The children sleep, dreaming of summer days, of picnics and games. The mother goes downstairs to join her husband. They sit in the silence, listening to the fire. They do not talk about the dam. They do not think about the dam. They have no reason to. And up at the lake, the water continues to rise. The dam continues to strain. The clock is ticking. But for now, everything is calm. Everything is still. The rain falls and the night deepens, and the story waits, patient and quiet like the water behind the dam. And so the night deepens and the rain continues to fall, and the people of Johnstown sleep unaware. The dam, too, holds its breath, though its cracks are widening and its earthen heart is softening. It is a strange thing to think of a dam as a living creature, but in those final hours it seems almost sentient, groaning under the weight of the lake. The water behind it is not angry, not malicious. It is simply obeying the laws of gravity and pressure, gathering force, waiting for the moment when the earth can no longer contain it. Let us stay with that image for a moment. The lake at the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club is beautiful, even in the rain. The water is dark, like polished slate, and it stretches for miles, lapping at the shores of the surrounding hills. The club members have built small cottages along the shoreline, with porches and boathouses and manicured lawns. On a summer day, the lake is a place of leisure, where wealthy men from Pittsburgh bring their families to fish and sail and forget the smoke of the steel mills. But tonight, the lake is a beast, swollen and restless. The rain has been falling for days, and the streams that feed the lake are swollen, rushing down from the hillsides, carrying leaves and twigs and soil. The lake has risen far beyond its normal level, and the spillway, which was meant to carry excess water away, is overwhelmed. The water flows over it in a wide sheet, but it is not enough. The level keeps rising. Up on the dam, the watchman, a man named John Park, is standing in the rain, holding a lantern. He is a young man, only in his mid-20s, but he has been hired by the club to keep an eye on things. He knows dams. He grew up around them, and he knows that this one is in trouble. The dam is not a modern structure built by engineers. It is an old earthen dam, originally built for a canal system that was abandoned years ago. The club bought the property and raised the dam a few feet, but they did not reinforce it properly. They did not add a proper spillway. They simply patched it up and hoped for the best. And now, with the rain and the rising water, the patches are failing. John Park walks the length of the dam, his boots squelching in the mud. He shines his lantern on the face of the dam and he sees the cracks. They are not large, but they are there, thin lines running horizontally, weeping water. The dam is bulging slightly in the middle, a telltale sign of stress. He has seen this before in older dams just before they gave way. He knows that if the water continues to rise, the dam will fail. He sends word to the club officials in Pittsburgh, but they are slow to respond. They are men of business, accustomed to delegating. They do not understand the urgency. They assume that the dam is sturdy, that the watchman is being cautious. They say they will send someone tomorrow, but tomorrow will be too late. As the night wears on, John Park does what he can. He tries to lower the lake level by opening the discharge pipes at the base of the dam, but they are clogged with debris and sediment. He works with a few other men trying to clear them, but it is slow going. The water is rising faster than they can drain it. By midnight, the lake is several feet above the crest of the spillway. The dam is now holding back more water than it was ever designed to hold. It is a ticking clock, but the people in the valley below do not know it. And so we drift through the dark hours. The rain continues, steady and relentless. In Johnstown, the streets are empty. The street lamps glow through the drizzle, casting halos of light on the wet cobblestones. A lone dog walks down the middle of a street, its fur soaked, its tail low. It stops and shakes, then continues on its way. A clock tower strikes 11, then 12, then 1. The town is silent except for the sound of rain and the distant rumble of the river, which is growing louder, though no one notices. In the boarding houses and hotels, guests sleep, their windows closed against the damp. In the factories along the river, the night shift works, the clatter of machinery muffled by the rain. A few men stand under the eaves of a foundry, smoking pipes, watching the water creep up the bank. They talk about the flood of 1847, about how the water reached the second floor of the dry goods store. They agree that this rain is worse, but they have faith in the dam. They have always had faith in the dam, and up at the lake the faith is fading. John Park is now desperate. He knows that the dam cannot hold much longer. He has seen the cracks widen and the bulging has increased. The dam is now visibly trembling, a vibration that he can feel through the soles of his boots. He decides to send another rider down the valley, this time with a more urgent warning. He wakes a young man named Elias, the same rider who tried earlier, and tells him to ride as fast as he can, to warn every town along the way to not stop until he reaches Johnstown. Elias is exhausted, but he understands the gravity of the moment. He mounts his horse and sets off into the rain. The road is treacherous. The rain has turned it into a muddy stream, and the horse struggles to keep its footing. Elias rides through the small community of South Fork, shouting at the windows, waking people up. Some of them listen and begin to gather their families. Others do not. They have heard warnings before, false alarms. They go back to sleep. Elias continues down the valley, his voice growing hoarse. He passes through Mineral Point, through East Canema, through Woodville. In each town, he stops long enough to shout, to bang on doors, to tell people to get to higher ground. But the minutes are slipping away, and the water is moving faster than his horse. It is now a little after 3 in the afternoon on Friday, May 31st, 1889. The dam is on the verge of collapse. John Park is standing on the dam, watching the water pour over the top. The entire crest of the dam is now a waterfall, and the face of the dam is eroding, the earth being washed away in great chunks. He knows it is time to leave. He turns and runs, stumbling down the slope of the dam, heading for higher ground. Behind him, he hears a sound that he will never forget. It is not a roar, not exactly. It is a deep, groaning, sucking sound, like the earth itself is taking a final breath. Then the dam gives way. The center of the dam collapses first, a section about 200 feet wide. The water behind it surges forward, not as a wave but as a solid wall, a moving mountain of dark water that is 40 feet high at its crest. It carries with it the debris of the dam, trees that have been uprooted, boulders that have been torn from the hillside, parts of the club's cottages, a boat, a picnic table, a wooden dock. All of it is churning together in a swirling mass of brown water and splintered wood. The wall of water moves down the valley at a speed that seems impossible, 40 miles per hour, maybe faster. It is a force of nature that does not discriminate, that does not pause, that does not care. And in Johnstown, 14 miles away, the people are still unaware. It is a little after 4 in the afternoon. The rain has slackened to a drizzle and the skies are beginning to lighten. Some people are out on the streets, walking home from work, stopping at the stores, chatting with neighbors. The river is high, but no one is alarmed. They have seen high water before. A man named Jacob is standing on the bridge that crosses the Little Canemo River near the center of town. He is a blacksmith, a large man with calloused hands. He is holding a fishing pole, though he knows the fishing is poor today. He is just standing, looking at the water, enjoying the cool air after the rain. He hears a sound, a low rumble like distant thunder, but it does not fade. It grows louder, and with it comes a vibration in the ground, a trembling in his feet. He looks up the valley and he sees something coming. At first, he thinks it is a fog, a cloud of mist. But then he sees the shape beneath it, a dark wall, a moving mass. His mind cannot process what he is seeing. He has lived in this valley his whole life, and he has never seen anything like it. The wall of water is almost upon him. It is carrying trees like matchsticks, houses like toys. The roar becomes a scream, and then the water hits. The bridge is swept away in an instant, and Jacob is gone, swallowed by the wave. The houses along the riverbank are crushed, lifted, and carried. The water surges through the town, filling the streets, rising up over the first floors, then the second floors, then the rooftops. The noise is incredible, a cacophony of splintering wood, crashing brick, and the screams of people who have only seconds to realize what is happening. But the screams are soon drowned out by the roar of the water. Let us not dwell on the violence. Let us instead think of the aftermath, the strange quiet that follows. The wall of water passes through the town in less than 10 minutes, but it leaves behind a world transformed. Where there had been streets and shops and homes, there is now a lake of mud and debris. The water begins to recede slowly, revealing the wreckage. The town is gone. The familiar landmarks are erased. The railroad bridge, a massive stone structure, still stands, but it is clogged with piles of wreckage, tangled heaps of lumber, furniture, and bodies. A fire breaks out in the debris and it burns for days, consuming what the water spared. In the days that follow, survivors emerge from the ruins. They are covered in mud, bruised, in shock. They search for their loved ones, digging through piles of wreckage with their bare hands. The rain has finally stopped, but the sky is gray, and the air smells of wet wood and death. The story of the Johnstown Flood is a story of loss, but it is also a story of survival, of the resilience of the human spirit. And in telling it, we must honor those who lived and those who died, not by focusing on the horror, but by remembering the quiet moments before, the small joys, the ordinary lives. So let us return now to that Thursday evening before the disaster. Let us sit by the fire in a cozy room listening to the rain. The clock on the mantel ticks softly. The flames flicker. The world is safe for now. And the story continues, patient and gentle like the falling rain. So let us settle deeper into the chair by the fire. The rain has softened to a whisper now, a gentle hush against the window panes. The clock on the mantel ticks on, marking the seconds that pass so quietly, so unnoticed. Outside, the streets of Johnstown are wet and glistening under the gas lamps. The cobblestones reflect the yellow light in a patchwork of shining puddles. A cat darts from beneath a porch, shakes a paw, and vanishes into the shadows. The world feels small and safe, contained within the warm glow of this room. But let us wander a little in our minds through those same streets on that Thursday evening. Let us follow a man named Thomas, a clerk at the dry goods store. He is locking up for the night, pulling the heavy wooden door closed, testing the handle. He looks up at the sky, feels the drizzle on his face, and he sighs. He thinks of his wife at home, waiting for him with a pot of stew on the stove. He thinks of the small fire they will build in the hearth and the book he has been reading, a novel about faraway lands and adventures. He turns up his collar and begins to walk, his footsteps echoing softly in the empty street. Thomas passes the bakery where the baker is just pulling down the shutters. A warm scent of bread lingers in the air, mixing with the damp. They nod to each other, a quiet greeting between neighbors. The baker has a daughter, a girl of 12 who helps him in the shop. She is at home now doing her lessons by lamplight, her hair braided tightly, her eyes heavy with sleep. She has a small dog, a terrier named Pip, who curls at her feet. The baker thinks of her as he walks home, a gentle warmth spreading through his chest. He does not know that tomorrow the river will take his shop, his home, and his daughter. But we do not need to think of that now. Let us stay in the safe present, in the quiet of Thursday evening. Further up the hill, in a cottage that overlooks the town, an old woman named Margaret sits in her rocking chair. She is knitting, the needles clicking in a steady rhythm. She has lived in Johnstown for 60 years since she was a girl. She remembers the flood of 1847 when the water rose high enough to float a horse trough down Main Street. She remembers the mud, the smell, the long weeks of cleaning up. But she also remembers the community coming together, the shared meals, the rebuilding. She is not afraid of the rain. She has seen it before. She rocks slowly, her eyes half closed, the yarn pooling in her lap. Outside, the rain continues, a lullaby for the old. Down by the river, a group of young men are sitting on the porch of a boarding house. They are smoking pipes and drinking coffee, watching the water rise. One of them, a railroad worker named Daniel, has been telling stories about the Great Flood in Pennsylvania 20 years ago. His listeners are skeptical, amused. They laugh and shake their heads. The river looks high but not dangerous. They have heard these stories many times. Daniel shrugs and takes a long drag from his pipe. He looks at the sky, at the clouds scudding overhead, and he feels a prickle of unease, a small cold spot in his chest, but he says nothing. He finishes his coffee and goes inside to sleep. At the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, a different scene unfolds. The clubhouse is grand and warm, lit by chandeliers and fireplaces. The members are wealthy men from Pittsburgh, industrialists and bankers. They have come for the weekend to escape the city, to fish and hunt and play cards. Tonight they are gathered in the lounge, smoking cigars and drinking brandy. The rain is an annoyance, keeping them indoors, but they are comfortable. They talk of business deals, of railroad stocks, of the upcoming election. The dam is not mentioned. It is not a concern. The dam was built by their own engineers, maintained by their own workers. It is strong. It is safe. But high above them, on the crest of the dam, the water is now lapping at the top. The foreman, John Park, has been walking the length of the dam all evening, his lantern swinging, casting long shadows. He has seen the cracks, the seepage, the bulging face. He has sent word to the club members, but they have not responded. They are busy with their brandy and their cigars. He is alone with the truth. He watches the water rise inch by inch, and he knows that nothing he can do will stop it. He is a man standing on the edge of a catastrophe, and he can only wait. Let us leave him there for a moment, on the dam in the dark. Let us return to Johnstown, to the bedrooms and parlors, to the quiet lives. A young couple, newly married, are lying in bed. The woman is reading aloud from a magazine, a serial story about a detective in London. Her husband listens, his arm around her, his eyes closed. The rain is a comfortable sound, a roof over their heads. They feel safe. They feel young. They do not know that in a few hours the roof will be gone, the walls will be gone, and the street will be a river. But that is later. For now, there is only the soft rustle of paper, the warmth of the body beside them, the steady rhythm of the rain. The night deepens. The clock in the church tower strikes 2. The rain has not stopped. It has become a part of the town, a constant companion, a blanket of sound. In the poorer neighborhoods along the river, the water is beginning to creep into the basements. Families wake to find their floors wet, their stored goods floating. They move their belongings to the upper floors, grumbling and sighing. They have dealt with high water before. They will deal with it again. They do not panic. They simply adapt. A woman named Catherine carries her baby up the narrow stairs. The baby is crying, disturbed by the commotion. Catherine sings a soft lullaby, a song her mother sang to her. The words are old, the tune simple. She sets the baby in a cradle on the second floor and sits beside it, rocking gently. Her husband is downstairs, moving boxes, trying to salvage what he can. The water is ankle deep now and rising, but Catherine trusts him. She trusts the dam. She closes her eyes and listens to the rain. By 3 in the morning, the water in the streets is knee-deep in some places. The wooden sidewalks have begun to float, bobbing like rafts. A few people venture out to check on their neighbors, wading through the cold water with lanterns held high. They call out to each other, their voices muffled by the rain. The town is awake now, but not alarmed. It is a nuisance, this flood, but nothing more. They have seen it before. They expect the water to recede by morning, but the water does not recede. It continues to rise slowly, steadily, a patient tide. And up at the dam, the patience is running out. John Park has been joined by a few workers, men who have stayed to help. They are now trying to dig a spillway to relieve the pressure, but it is too little, too late. The water is pouring over the top of the dam in a steady sheet, cascading down the face, eroding the earth. The dam is trembling now, a shudder that runs through the entire structure. John Park knows that it will not hold until dawn. He sends one more rider down the valley, a desperate plea. The rider, a young man named Elias, mounts his horse and rides into the darkness. The rain stings his face and the road is slick with mud. He pushes the horse as fast as it can go, shouting at the top of his lungs when he reaches the first town, South Fork. He bangs on doors, yells at windows. Some people listen. They grab their children and their valuables and head for the hills. Others do not. They have heard this before. They close their windows and go back to sleep. Elias pushes on down the valley, through Mineral Point, through East Kanema. Each town is a blur of wet roofs and dark streets. His voice grows hoarse, his horse begins to stumble from exhaustion, but he cannot stop. He knows what is coming. He can feel it in the ground, a low vibration that is not the thunder. He can hear it in the distance, a rumble that grows louder with every passing minute. The wall of water is already moving, faster than his horse, faster than any warning. In Johnstown, the dawn is breaking, gray and watery. The rain has slackened to a drizzle and the clouds are thin, patches of pale light showing through. People are beginning to stir, to look out their windows at the flooded streets. Some are amused, some annoyed. A man stands on his porch, smoking a pipe, watching a barrel float past. His neighbor calls out from across the street, asking if he needs help. He laughs and waves. It is just a flood. It will pass. And then, at exactly 4:07 in the afternoon, after a day of waiting, of rising water, of false hope, the sound comes. It is not a sound that anyone in Johnstown has ever heard before. It is a roar, but deeper than thunder, more solid than a train. It is the sound of a mountain falling, of the earth itself splitting open. And then they see it. A wall of dark water, 40 feet high, carrying trees and houses and rocks, moving toward them with the speed of a galloping horse. There is no time to run. There is no time to scream. The wave hits and the town is gone. But we do not need to stay in that moment. Let us step back. Let us float above the scene like a wisp of smoke, and let us watch from a distance without fear. The wave passes over the town, and then the water settles, calm again, covering everything with a layer of mud and debris. The sun breaks through the clouds, shining on the strange new landscape. And in the days that follow, the survivors emerge, digging through the wreckage, finding each other, holding hands, crying, laughing, living. Let us remember them now not as victims, but as people. Let us remember the baker and his daughter, the clerk Thomas, the old woman Margaret, the young couple reading in bed. Let us remember Catherine and her baby, the railroad worker Daniel, the club members with their brandy and cigars. They all had lives, full of small joys and ordinary troubles. And in telling their story, we honor them, not by lingering on the horror, but by sitting with them in the quiet before the storm, by listening to the rain, by feeling the warmth of the fire. The clock ticks on. The rain continues to fall, soft and steady, and the story, like the river, flows on, patient and gentle, carrying us forward into the night. The clock ticks on. The rain continues to fall, soft and steady, and the story, like the river, flows on, patient and gentle, carrying us forward into the night. After the wave passes, after the roar fades into a distant rumble, there is a moment of absolute stillness. The air is thick with mist and the smell of wet earth. The sun, pale and watery, breaks through the clouds and touches the strange new landscape. The town of Johnstown is no longer a town. It is a wide, muddy plain, dotted with broken timbers, twisted iron, and the silent shapes of houses turned to kindling. The streets are gone. The church is gone. The bridge that once spanned the river is now a tangled heap of stone and steel, a dam of debris holding back a lake of wreckage. In the quiet that follows, the first sound is a bird. A robin, perched on a splintered fence post, begins to sing. It is a small sound, but it carries across the devastation, a thread of life in the silence. Then another sound rises, a human sound, a low moan from beneath a pile of boards. A hand reaches up, pale and trembling, and a voice calls out, weak and desperate. The rescue has begun, but it will be a slow, patient work, like sifting through the ruins of an old dream. Let us walk beside the rescuers, not as participants but as quiet observers, drifting above the scene as the hours pass. The first survivors emerge from the mud, covered in gray silt, their clothes torn, their faces blank with shock. They are pulled from the debris by neighbors, by strangers, by men who have come from the hills with shovels and ropes. There is no panic now, only a quiet determination. A woman sits on an overturned cart, cradling a cat in her lap. The cat is alive, but its fur is matted with mud and it shivers. The woman does not move. She stares at the horizon, at the line where the mountains meet the sky, and she breathes slowly, in and out. Nearby, a man is digging with his bare hands, his fingers raw and bleeding. He is searching for his wife. He does not speak. He digs. Other men join him, and together they lift a heavy beam, revealing a small pocket of space beneath. There is no one there. They move on to the next pile, the next promise. The work is slow, meditative, like a ritual. And then in the late afternoon, a shout goes up. A child has been found, a little girl named Lily, wedged between two barrels in a cellar. She is alive, her eyes wide, her lips blue with cold. She is lifted out gently, wrapped in a blanket, carried to a makeshift hospital that has been set up in the only building still standing, a brick warehouse on the edge of town. Inside, the floors are covered with straw and rows of cots hold the injured, their wounds bandaged with torn sheets. A doctor moves from cot to cot, his hands steady, his voice low. He is tired, but he does not stop. There is no time for rest. The night falls again, the second night since the flood. Fires are lit in the ruins, small flames that flicker and dance, casting long shadows. People gather around them, sharing what little they have salvaged: a loaf of bread, a bottle of whiskey, a dry coat. They do not talk much. They stare into the flames, listening to the crackle of the wood, the hiss of damp timber. The stars come out bright and cold, and the moon rises, full and silver, illuminating the wreckage with a gentle light. Let us sit by one of these fires just for a moment and listen to the voices. An old man, his beard white with dust, tells a story about the time he saw a bear in the woods behind his cabin. He tells it slowly, with long pauses, as if the memory itself is a fragile thing. A young woman, her arm in a sling, hums a tune her grandmother used to sing. The tune is soft, melancholy, and it drifts into the night, mingling with the scent of smoke and damp earth. Across the fire, a boy of about 12 is holding a piece of wood he has carved into a small boat. He sets it on a puddle and watches it float. He does not say anything. He just watches. His mother, sitting beside him, puts her arm around his shoulders. She does not tell him to stop. She lets him float his little boat on the water. It is a small thing, but it is a thing of hope, a tiny vessel carrying a boy's imagination through the mud. In the distance, the sound of a train whistle cuts through the air. It is a locomotive from Pittsburgh bringing supplies, blankets, food, doctors. The whistle is long and mournful, like a call across a valley. People lift their heads, listen, and then turn back to the fire. The train will arrive in the morning. For now, there is only the night, the stars, and the slow breathing of the survivors. Dawn comes softly, with a pale pink sky and a light mist rising from the river. The water has receded, leaving behind a thick layer of mud, inches deep, covering everything. The town looks like a place that has been buried and then unearthed, a ghost of itself. But life is stirring. A woman is sweeping the mud from her front step, a small act of defiance. A man is hammering a board across a broken window. The sounds of work begin to fill the air, tentative at first, then steady, like a heartbeat. And as the days pass, the recovery takes on a rhythm. The dead are buried in a mass grave on a hill overlooking the valley. A simple stone marks the place with no names, only the date. The living return to their homes or what is left of them and begin to rebuild. They dig through the mud, salvaging photographs, a silver spoon, a child's doll. Each small treasure is a piece of the past, a reminder that they were once a community, that they had lives before the water. Let us follow one family, the Whitfields, as they sort through the debris of their home. The house is gone, but the foundation remains, a rectangle of stone filled with mud and splintered wood. Mr. Whitfield, a carpenter by trade, finds his toolbox, rusted but intact. He opens it and removes a saw, wiping the mud from the blade. The saw gleams in the sunlight, and he holds it for a long moment as if weighing its worth. Then he sets it aside. Mrs. Whitfield finds a china plate, cracked but whole, the pattern of blue flowers still visible. She washes it in a bucket of river water and places it on a stump. It is a small act, but it is a start. Their daughter, a girl of 9, uncovers a book, its pages swollen and stuck together. She carefully peels them apart one by one and finds a story she remembers about a princess and a dragon. She sits down in the mud and begins to read aloud, her voice soft and uncertain. Her parents stop their work and listen. The story fills the emptiness, a familiar tune in a strange land. On the outskirts of town, a man named Samuel is building a new house. He is doing it alone with a hammer and a saw and a pile of lumber that has been donated by the relief committee. He works slowly, methodically, measuring each board twice before cutting. He does not rush. He has all the time in the world. His wife and children died in the flood and he has no one left to rush for. But he builds anyway, because building is what he does, because a house is a thing that stands against the rain. The weeks turn into months. The mud is cleared from the streets. The railroad is repaired. The telegraph lines are strung again, clicking with messages from distant relatives, from strangers offering help. Johnstown begins to take shape again, a new town built on the bones of the old. The people do not forget. They cannot forget. But they learn to live with the memory, to carry it with them like a scar that aches in the cold. And on certain nights when the rain falls again, when the wind howls through the valleys, some of them lie awake, listening. They hear the sound of water, soft and insistent, and they feel a tremor in their chests, a memory of fear. But they also hear the sound of their own breathing, the steady rhythm of a heart that goes on beating. They wrap their arms around their loved ones and they close their eyes and they wait for the dawn. Let us leave them there in their beds, in their new homes, under the same moon that once shone on the old town. The river flows on, wide and calm, carrying the story downstream into the night, into the quiet. The clock ticks, the fire crackles, and we drift gently like the smoke from a dying ember into the soft dark of the past. But the story does not end there. Even as we drift, the echoes of that night linger in the hills, and the memory of the flood becomes a part of the landscape itself. The river, you see, does not forget. It carries the silt and the stories downstream, depositing them in the quiet eddies, in the roots of the willows that bend over the banks. And the people, they carry the memory too, in their bones, in the way they pause when the rain begins to fall, in the way they glance at the sky before they go to sleep. In the weeks after the flood, a man named Elias, a farmer who lived on a ridge above Johnstown, walks down into the valley every morning. He carries a shovel and a basket, and he picks his way through the debris, looking for things that might be useful. A length of rope, a bucket with a hole, a broken chair that can be mended. He does not take anything that belongs to the dead. He leaves the photographs, the letters, the small keepsakes for the families to find. But the practical things, the tools and the lumber, he collects and stacks in a pile near the railroad tracks where the relief workers can use them. One morning, Elias finds a leather satchel half buried in the mud. He opens it carefully, expecting papers or perhaps a change of clothes. Inside, there is a flute made of dark wood with silver keys. It is tarnished, but when he lifts it to his lips and blows, it makes a soft, clear note, like a bird calling from a distant tree. He wipes the mouthpiece clean and plays a simple melody, a folk tune his grandmother used to hum. The notes drift across the wreckage, and for a moment, the men and women digging in the ruins stop and listen. They do not smile, but their shoulders relax, just slightly, as if the music reminds them that there is still beauty in the world. Elias puts the flute back in the satchel and carries it to the makeshift town hall, where a list of lost items is kept. He writes a note, "Flute found near the corner of Main and Washington." He leaves it there, hoping that someone will claim it, and someone does. A few days later, a young woman named Margaret comes to the town hall, her eyes red from crying. She describes the flute, the silver keys, the small chip in the mouthpiece. It belonged to her brother, who had been a musician, who had played in a small band at dances on Saturday nights. She holds the flute in her hands and she does not play it. She just holds it, feeling the familiar weight, the smooth wood. Then she wraps it in a cloth and tucks it into her coat, and she walks home, or what is left of home, and she places the flute on a shelf. It will stay there, untouched, for many years, a reminder of what was lost and what was found. Across town, a different kind of recovery is taking place. A group of men, mostly immigrants from Eastern Europe who worked in the steel mills, gather in a small clearing near the river. They are speaking in hushed tones, their words a mix of Polish, Slovak, and broken English. They are planning to build a church, not a grand cathedral, but a simple wooden chapel with a steeple and a bell. They have no money, no lumber, no tools beyond what they can salvage, but they have faith and they have each other. They begin by digging a foundation, using their hands and a few shovels. They work in the evenings after their shifts cleaning the debris. They work by lantern light, their shadows long and flickering. A man named Jan, a blacksmith by trade, forges a bell from scraps of metal he finds in the wreckage. It is not a perfect bell. It has a crack in it and the tone is a little flat. But when Jan hangs it in a wooden frame and rings it, the sound carries across the valley, a low, resonant hum that seems to settle into the earth. The people hear it and they stop their work for a moment, and they listen. It is the first bell they have heard since the flood. It calls them to prayer, to remember, to hope. The chapel is finished in the autumn when the leaves have turned gold and the air is crisp. It is small, with a dirt floor and windows made of oiled paper. But the people come, filling the pews made from packing crates. They sing hymns, their voices blending together, old songs in new tongues. The priest, a young man who had survived by clinging to a tree, speaks of the flood as a test, a trial that had been given to them not as punishment but as a reminder of the fragility of life. He does not offer easy answers. He offers only his presence, his words, his quiet faith. The congregation listens, and they feel a weight lift, just a little, as if the singing itself has carried some of their sorrow away. Meanwhile, in a large white tent on the edge of town, the Red Cross has set up a distribution center. Clara Barton herself, the founder of the American Red Cross, has come to Johnstown. She is a small woman with gray hair and steady eyes, and she moves through the tent with quiet efficiency. She inspects the supplies, talks to the volunteers, and personally hands out blankets to the families who have lost everything. She does not rush. She takes time to speak to each person, to learn their names, to ask about their children. She knows the power of being seen, of being recognized in the midst of chaos. One afternoon, a woman approaches Clara Barton with a small, hand-drawn map. The woman explains that her husband had been a surveyor, and he had made this map before the flood, showing the layout of the town, every street, every building, every tree. The map is smudged and water-stained, but it is still legible. Clara Barton takes the map and thanks the woman, and she uses it to help coordinate the search for bodies, to identify the locations of homes and businesses. The map becomes a precious document, a guide through the ruins. And as the autumn deepens into winter, the work of rebuilding continues. The streets are paved with cinders from the steel mills. The houses rise again, one by one, simple wooden frames with tin roofs. The people learn to live with the chill of the wind, with the damp that seeps into their bones. They plant gardens in the spring, small patches of green among the gray. They have children, and they name them after the loved ones they have lost, keeping the names alive. On the anniversary of the flood, the town holds a ceremony. They gather at the mass grave on the hill, where the bodies of the unknown dead are buried. A minister reads the names of those who have been identified, a long list that takes over an hour to recite. The crowd listens in silence, each name a stone dropped into still water. When the reading is done, they place flowers on the grave, simple wildflowers picked from the hillsides. And then they return to their homes, to their dinners, to their quiet evenings. Let us walk through the streets of Johnstown some 10 years later. The town has changed. The buildings are newer, plainer, built with a practical eye. The river is still there, of course, but it is held in check by new levees, higher and stronger than the old ones. The people have not forgotten the flood, but they have learned to live with it, like a scar that has healed and turned white. The children who were born after the flood do not remember the roar of the water. They know only the stories, the tales told by their grandparents, the photographs in the albums. And in the corner of the town square, there is a small bronze bell mounted on a stone pedestal. It is the bell from the South Fork Dam, the same bell that warned the people of South Fork that the dam had broken. It was salvaged from the wreckage and placed here as a reminder, a warning to future generations. The bell has not been rung since that night, but it gleams in the sun, polished by the hands of the townspeople who touch it as they pass, a gesture of remembrance. The years continue to pass, and the story of the Johnstown Flood becomes a part of the larger story of America, a tale of disaster and resilience, of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. It is told in classrooms, in history books, in documentaries. But the true telling, the one that matters most, happens in the quiet moments, around kitchen tables in the soft glow of a lamp, when a grandmother leans forward and says, "I remember that night." And she tells it not with drama or horror, but with a calm, steady voice, the way you might describe a dream that has stayed with you for decades. And so we come back to the river, the gentle, ever-flowing river that runs through the valley. It is quiet now under the stars. The moon reflects on its surface, and the trees lean over it, their leaves whispering in the breeze. If you sit by its banks on a soft summer night and close your eyes, you might hear the faint echo of the past, not a scream or a roar, but a whisper, a sigh, the sound of a town that was and is no more. And then you might open your eyes and see the fireflies beginning to glow, small lights in the darkness, blinking like the stars themselves, and you will know that life goes on, that the world is full of small miracles, that even after the worst of storms there is peace. Let us stay here by the river for just a little longer. The crickets are singing their slow, rhythmic song. The water laps at the bank, a gentle sound like a lullaby. The night air is cool and sweet, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. We do not need to speak. We only need to be here, present, breathing in the quiet, feeling the weight of the past settle over us like a blanket. Soon, we will rise and go home to our own beds, our own quiet rooms. But we will carry this story with us, not as a burden, but as a memory, a reminder that even in the darkest times there is light, there is hope, there is the steady pulse of life continuing, moment by moment, breath by breath. And so, until we meet again, let the river flow, let the stars shine, let the clock tick, and let us find our rest in the soft dark of the night, in the gentle embrace of sleep. But before we truly drift off, let us stay a little longer, for there is more to this river's story, and it is told in the quietest of ways. You see, the Johnstown flood did not end when the waters receded. It did not end when the bodies were buried, or when the new houses were built. It continued, like a slow underground current, in the lives of those who survived, in the memories they carried, in the small, almost invisible acts of kindness that echoed through the decades. Consider the story of a woman named Mary, who lived on the hill above Johnstown, in a small white house with a porch swing. She was 23 when the flood came, and she lost her husband and her 2 young children. She found them days later, tangled in the branches of a tree nearly 20 miles downstream. Mary did not leave Johnstown. She stayed in that house on the hill, and she opened a small school for the children of the town, teaching them to read and write in a room with a coal stove and worn wooden desks. She never remarried. She never spoke of the flood unless a child asked, and then she would simply say, "It was very dark, and the water was very cold," and then she would turn back to the lesson at hand. But at night, alone in her kitchen, Mary would take out a tin box from under her bed, and inside that box were 3 silver spoons, each one engraved with the initials of a family member. She would polish them with a soft cloth, even though they were already bright, and she would hold them to the lamplight, letting the metal catch the glow. She would not weep. She would simply sit, her hands quiet in her lap, and watch the shadows on the wall. And then she would put the spoons back in the box, and she would go to bed, and she would sleep, and in the morning she would wake and begin again. That is the quiet truth of survival. It is not a grand arc of triumph. It is a series of small, repeated motions, like the ticking of a clock, like the ripples on a pond. Mary lived to be 89, and when she died, her students lined the street outside the church, holding the wildflowers she had taught them to name: bluebells, Queen Anne's lace, goldenrod. They did not know the full story of her grief, but they knew she had loved them, and that was enough. And there is another story, one that involves a dog. In the days after the flood, a man named Thomas, a railroad worker, found a small black mongrel whimpering in a tangle of debris near the stone bridge. The dog was thin, its fur matted with mud, and one of its legs was broken. Thomas carried the dog to his tent, set the leg with twigs and strips of cloth, and fed it scraps from his own meager rations. The dog recovered, and it followed Thomas everywhere, a silent shadow with a wagging tail. Thomas named it Lucky, but he knew the name was a kind of joke. Luck had little to do with it. What mattered was that they had found each other. In the years that followed, Lucky became a familiar sight on the streets of the rebuilt town. The dog would wait outside the saloon where Thomas sometimes stopped for a beer, and when Thomas emerged, Lucky would stand and start walking, and Thomas would follow, not leading but simply keeping pace. People would see them and smile, a small warmth in a cold day. And when Thomas died, old and gray, Lucky lay on his grave for a week, until a neighbor finally coaxed the dog away to a new home. But Lucky would return to that grave every morning until the dog's own bones were laid in the earth nearby. The two plots are still there, in the old cemetery, side by side, the stones worn smooth by weather and time. If you visit, you might see a collar, a small piece of faded leather, tied around the base of Thomas's marker, left by someone who remembers the story, who knows that even a dog can teach us about loyalty. And so the river keeps flowing and the town keeps living, not on top of the flood, but alongside it. The children of the survivors now walk these streets, and they ride bicycles, and they argue about school and sports and music. They do not think about the flood, not really, except when a teacher assigns a report, or when the town holds a centennial ceremony, which they attend with their parents and grandparents, and they listen to the speeches, and they look at the photographs, and they feel a vague, distant sadness, like the echo of a song they have heard before. But there are still those who remember in the marrow of their bones. There is an old man, a great-grandson of one of the survivors, who keeps a diary. He writes in it every evening by the light of a single lamp, in a hand that is slow and careful. He does not write about the flood. He writes about the day he saw a heron stand still in the river for an hour, its slender legs like needles, and he writes about the taste of the blackberries that grow along the banks, and he writes about the color of the sky at dusk when the clouds are painted pink and orange. He is preserving something, though he cannot say what. Perhaps it is the texture of a life that could have been erased, the ordinary beauty that the flood could not take. And as you listen to this in your own quiet room with the blanket pulled up to your chin, you might think of your own river, whatever it may be. The memories you carry, the small losses, the quiet joys. The way the light falls through the window in the afternoon, the sound of rain on the roof, the touch of a hand in the dark. These are the things that hold us together, that make us who we are. They are not dramatic, they are not loud, but they are real and they are enough. So let the river be your guide. Let it teach you the patience of water which flows around the stone, which fills the hollow, which wears down the sharp edge into a smooth curve. Let it teach you that nothing truly disappears, not completely. The molecules of that flood are still here, in the soil, in the air, in the cells of the trees that grew from the mud. And the people, the thousands who perished, they are here too, in the stories, in the names carved into stone, in the way the town gathers on the anniversary to ring a small, cracked bell. Let us imagine that bell now. It is a quiet evening late in May, the same time of year as the flood. The sky is clear, the stars are beginning to appear, and a group of townsfolk stands in the square around the bronze bell from the South Fork Dam. They do not cheer, they do not weep. They simply stand, and after a moment one of them steps forward, a woman in her 70s, whose grandmother had been a girl in the flood. She takes the rope, and she pulls it once, and the bell sounds a low, clear note that carries across the valley, over the river, up into the hills. It is not a mournful sound. It is a sound of remembrance, of acknowledgement of the simple fact that we were here and we are still here. And then the people disperse, walking home under the streetlights, their footsteps soft on the pavement. Some of them stop to talk, their voices low and easy. Others walk in silence, their hands in their pockets. They are not haunted. They are not afraid. They are simply living as people have always lived, with the past behind them and the future ahead, and the present a thin line between them, shimmering like the surface of a river. And now, as the night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, we too can let go. We can release the story from our minds, let it drift downstream into the great lake of sleep. We have walked through the flood, through the mud, through the rebuilding, through the years of quiet grace. We have met the people, heard their names, felt their sorrow and their strength. And now we can rest, knowing that all is well, that the river flows on, that the world continues to turn, that this story is held in the gentle hands of memory, and that we are safe. So close your eyes if you have not already. Feel the weight of your body against the mattress. Hear the distant hum of a car, or the ticking of a clock, or the soft breath of someone else in the house. Let those sounds become the lapping of water against a bank, the rustle of leaves in a breeze. Let the darkness wrap around you like a soft blanket, warm and familiar. And in that darkness, let the bell ring one more time, not in your ears, but in your heart. A single, clear note that fades slowly, like a star dissolving into dawn. And with that fading, let your thoughts become quiet, your breathing slow, your muscles soften. You are here in this moment and you are enough. The story is finished, but the peace remains. Until we meet again, may the river be kind to you. May the stars watch over your rest. And may you wake in the morning light to the ordinary miracle of a new day. Good night. And yet, even as the bell fades, there is another layer to this story. One that is not often told, but which hums beneath the surface like a quiet current. It is the story of the water itself, and what it taught the people who remained. In the years after the flood, the river became a kind of teacher. Not in a classroom, not with books, but in the way it shaped the land and the lives of those who lived beside it. The engineers who came to rebuild the bridges and the dams learned a lesson in humility. They had believed before the flood that they could control the river, could tame it with concrete and steel. But the river had shown them otherwise. It had laughed at their calculations, had swept away their careful plans in a single night of rain. And so they built differently now, with wider channels and stronger walls, but with a quiet understanding that no wall is ever truly unbreakable. There is a man, a civil engineer named Samuel, who worked on the new dam for the reservoir at the head of the Kanema River. He was a young man when the flood hit, barely 20, and he had lost his brother in the wave. Samuel spent the rest of his life studying rivers, not to conquer them, but to listen to them. He would stand on the banks for hours, watching the water, noting its moods, its rhythms, the way it rose and fell with the seasons. He kept a journal, and in it he wrote not in numbers or equations, but in words. The river is patient today, it says on one page, or the river is restless, or the river is full of laughter. He was trying to learn the language of water, a language that is older than any human tongue. And in a way, he did learn it. He became known as a man who could predict a flood, not by instruments, but by the feel of the air, the smell of the mud, the way the birds flew. People would come to him and ask, "Samuel, will the river rise tonight?" And he would close his eyes and tilt his head, and after a moment he would say, "No, not tonight." Or he would say, "Yes, but not much." And he was always right. It was a kind of magic, but it was not magic. It was attention. It was the willingness to listen day after day, year after year, until the river spoke to him in its own quiet voice. Samuel never married. He lived alone in a small house near the river, with a cat and a dozen jars of preserved vegetables. He was not lonely. He had the river for company, and the river was enough. He died at 82, sitting in his chair by the window, looking out at the water. They found him with a smile on his face, and the cat curled in his lap. The neighbors said he looked peaceful, as if he had simply drifted off to sleep, carried away by the current of his own dreams. And there is another story, one that takes place many decades later in the 1970s. A young woman named Caroline, a graduate student in history, came to Johnstown to research the flood for her dissertation. She spent weeks in the archives, reading yellowed newspapers and faded letters, but something felt missing. She wanted to understand not just the facts, but the feeling of the flood, the texture of the experience. So she began to talk to the oldest residents, the grandchildren of survivors, and they told her stories that were not in any book. One old woman, a Mrs. Albright, who was 92 and lived in a creaky Victorian house on a hill, told Caroline about the day her grandmother lost her wedding ring. It was a simple gold band, and when the floodwater hit, it slipped off her finger and was gone. The grandmother searched for weeks, but the ring was never found. And then 60 years later, in 1949, a boy was digging in the mud by the river, looking for fishing worms, and he found a gold ring. He took it to his mother, who cleaned it, and on the inside of the band there was an inscription, "To my beloved May 1887." The boy's mother was Mrs. Albright's mother, and the ring had come home. Caroline wrote about this in her dissertation, and she titled the chapter, "The River's Return." There is a lesson in that, perhaps. The river does not keep what it takes forever. It holds things for a while, turning them over in its current, grinding them smooth, and then when the time is right, it gives them back. Not always, not even often, but sometimes. And those moments, those small returns, are like little miracles, proof that the world is not entirely random, that there is a thread of meaning, however thin, that runs through the chaos. And so the town continued through the decades, through wars and depressions and prosperity. The steel mills came, and they boomed, and the population grew, and the streets filled with new faces. The flood became a paragraph in the local history books, a story that parents told their children on rainy nights. But it never left the bones of the place. It was there, in the way the older houses were built on higher ground, in the way the children learned to swim almost before they could walk, in the way the town held its breath every spring when the snow melted and the river swelled. By the time the 20th century was turning into the 21st, the memory of the flood had begun to fade, not completely, but like a photograph left in the sun, losing its sharp edges, becoming softer, more golden. The survivors were all gone, their voices silent, their stories now carried only by their descendants. And yet, the flood lived on in other ways. It lived in the art that the town produced, the paintings of muddy water, the poems about lost children, the songs that were sung at the annual remembrance. It lived in the way the town rebuilt itself after every disaster, after every fire, every storm, every economic slump, as if it had learned once and for all that you cannot stop, you cannot give up. You simply put one foot in front of the other and keep going. And there is a particular painting, a large oil canvas that hangs in the town library, painted by a woman named Eleanor in 1935. It shows the flood, but not the wave itself. Instead, it shows the aftermath, the mud-covered streets, the shattered buildings, but with a strange beauty. The mud is painted in shades of brown and gold, and the sunlight filters through the heavy clouds, casting long shadows. In the foreground, a single flower, a daisy, is growing from a crack in a broken wall. The painting is called "Still Alive." Eleanor said she painted it to remind herself that life finds a way, even in the most broken places. She was a survivor herself, a girl of 12 when the flood came, and she had lost her entire family. She never married, never had children, but she painted, and her paintings filled the walls of her small apartment. And when she died, she left them all to the town. And the town hung them in the library, in the schools, in the hospital, so that everyone could see that beauty can bloom from destruction. That hope is not a fragile thing, but a stubborn one. And as you lie there in your soft bed, with the night pressing gently against the window, you might think of Eleanor and her flower and the cracked wall. You might think of all the broken things that have been remade, all the lost things that have been found, all the small acts of kindness that have kept the world turning. It is easy in the dark to feel alone, to feel that the weight of history is too heavy to bear. But you are not alone. You are part of a long chain stretching back through the flood, through the generations, through the cold and the mud and the fear, to the very first people who built their homes along this river, and before that to the river itself, which has always been there, flowing, patient, eternal. So let your mind drift like a leaf on the water. Let the names and faces of the flood become soft and blurred, like a dream that slips away in the morning. There is no need to hold them tight. They are safe, and you are safe. The story is over, but the river continues, and you are part of that river now, part of its slow, steady journey toward the sea. And maybe, in your sleep, you will visit that river. You will stand on its bank under a sky full of stars, and you will feel a hand in yours, a warm palm, familiar but unknown. It could be the hand of one of the lost, or the hand of one of the saved, or the hand of someone you have not yet met. It does not matter. What matters is the connection, the understanding that we are all linked across time, across distance, across the thin veil of life and death, by the water that flows through us and around us, in our blood and in our tears. And then the hand lets go, and you drift upward into the darkness, and you are asleep, truly asleep, your breath deep and even your body still, your mind at peace. The bell has rung its last note. The river has sung its quiet song, and you are cradled in the gentle arms of the night. Good night again. And may your dreams be as soft as the falling rain, as wide as the valley, as deep as the river. Good night.